Okay. So I think we're on air. I think we're recording. As you know, Pauline is still out in San Diego. She won't be back till Thursday, so I'll be managing this. As you saw, she is sometimes responding to emails, and she sent out a notice, an email about this week's projects. I can report that she's also worked on the grading forms that you guys did. Can you all hear me? The grading, pure grading forms that you did last Friday. She was just working on that just before we started here. So we don't have those ready to look at yet, but we will be looking at those together. I think it would be better to do it when she's on the Hangout. She may be able to hang out with us while in San Diego, although I don't know. But if worst comes to worst, we'll wait until Thursday's Hangout and look at those together and talk a little bit more about that. So looking at this week's schedule, we're into a unit on modeling. Modeling is one of the areas of abstraction that the CS Principles course emphasizes. I think, unlike some of the other units, this particular unit does, I think, a fairly good job of pulling together lots of different aspects of modeling and simulation. So you have animation with the coin flip app, and you've got discussion of how randomization works. You've got some examples of real-world modeling in this unit. So I think and it was quite a bit of programming assignments for today's work. Before we start talking about that, though, one thing we didn't talk about at all on Friday was your hello? One thing Dan, is that you, Dan Bates? Somehow there's a lot of noise associated with your link, which I just muted. Can you folks still hear me? Okay. Before we look at Unit 4, the lessons in Unit 4, today's work, I think we should go back to Friday and talk a little bit about one of the tests for Friday was creating some discussion questions for the Blown to Bits activity, Blown to Bits lesson. And I don't think we've talked about that much. So what it said was for 411, Blown to Bits, Chapter 2, you were asked to create some discussion questions to use with that lesson or to guide the reading. So that chapter is about privacy. I think that's one of the more accessible areas of global impact because we're all concerned about it, I think, including students. Initially, they weren't so concerned about it, but I think they're finding out that they need to be concerned about it too. So what are your thoughts on that? Let's spend a little time on talking about that. Maybe you could tell us some of the ideas you had for questions to guide that discussion or guide that reading, either way.
Hey, Ralph.
Hey. Hi, Josh. Is that Josh?
That is.
So anyone have any good examples of reading questions or?
So I had a couple of questions that I put down. I don't know if they're good. This is Sterling. One of my questions that I put was about the judge ordering the Xperia documents to be returned and destroyed, but did not order all the websites to have the documents removed. And so I asked why that was important and what effect that has on legal issues about documents found online.
Could you just remind us what the specific case was there?
So there was a Zyprixia, some sort of legal document that somebody got a hold of documents that they shouldn't, they only had permission to look at, but they published them online. And so the court ordered them to destroy the documents that they had, but it didn't go to all the other websites that had posted the same documents online and destroyed them. And so the judge said, all of your copies have to be destroyed, but the websites that this was posted on or copied and posted on, we're not going after them. They can keep it posted and keep it online.
Yeah, that does seem a little counterintuitive, huh?
So I had that question just to help them see how the web really is uncontrollable in many senses once something gets posted there.
Right. Is it your judgment that the judge's decision was based on the fact that it would be impossible to track down all of those?
I don't know that it was so much impossible. It started getting into technical terminology, but it just mentioned that there was a lot more to it. But I think that it set a precedence that when something is on the internet, it can be impossible, but at the same time, there's legal precedence where things can even stay up if they are on there.
Uh-huh. Okay. So what would be a good question to guide the reading or discussion in that particular area? Nice.
So I just asked them so my question was, when this happened, what effect does this have on, let's see, how did I word this? Oh, how would it affect future issues with documents online?
Okay. All right, very nice. Do others have examples like that they want to share or talk about?
Ralph, one of the things that I was impressed by was at the end of the chapter, it talked about the young man at Duke University that got charged with a rape when he really hadn't had anything to do with it, and he used all of his digital fingerprints to show that he wasn't there and couldn't have been the one that did that crime.
Uh-huh.
So I asked them to go through and state, what were the digital fingerprints that he was able to use to prove his innocence.
Uh-huh.
And then a more recent event sort of that went the other way was after the Boston Marathon bombings, there was published a picture of an individual who was originally thought to be one of the bombers. And sort of the online world went after him, trying to figure out who he was and where he was.
I remember that. Yep.
And he had absolutely nothing to do with the bombing, and it's taken him years to recover from that, if he ever will.
Yeah. Yeah, both excellent questions. So, one of the themes of the CS Principles course that these impact topics get at is beneficial and harmful effects of technology. And I think you can see in a lot of these questions that you've raised, but also in the readings themselves, examples where it goes both ways, right? The same technology is both beneficial in some respects and also harmful in other respects. So that's something very good to emphasize in the course, I think. one of the temptations sometimes is to view certain technology that one doesn't like as just purely harmful or purely beneficial. It's hardly ever the case that, I don't think there's been, at least I can't think of a good example where some particular example of technology is either one or the other. Technology is actually fairly neutral in how it's used that makes it harmful or beneficial. So those are good themes to try to draw out of students as you're having them read or discuss.
I'm trying to look up a link right now just to highlight that. So the new craze amongst all the kids and even some of my friends is this Pokemon Go game, which I know nothing about, but apparently is all the rage. But apparently some people figured out how to use the social aspect of it and drew 12 kids into this area and then like tried to abduct them using this thing. So it's like something that's a hot button topic, obviously, but it's relevant and the kids will know what that is. Typically if they're in the computer science class, hopefully or they're in AP computer science principles, they know a little bit about computer gaming. So just something to look for. And I'm going to look for that link here in just a second. I'll post it in the chat. So if you guys want to use and gals want to use that in your classes.
Yes, that's the second story I've heard about that. One of our teachers, I don't know whether you folks got the email or not, Michael Wilkos, who pointed out that this new Pokemon game isn't available in all countries, and somebody has hacked it, putting in some kind of bad software and distributing illegitimate copies of it around the world that if you download them onto your computer can do some harm. So another story associated with that app, which people really want to have. Yeah, thanks. Armed robbers use Pokemon Go. Wow. Other examples of questions?
I like to share FERPA with my students, specifically the biometric data that the state collects from students during state testing. In Rhode Island, we've just switched to computerized testing. Students are often surprised by the state's legal right to collect DNA, fingerprints, iris scans, family and medical data, all as a part of simply logging into a test. I posted a link to FERPA on the chat for anyone who's interested.
Wow. FERPA's federal, right?
Yeah, the name is quite old. I believe it goes back to maybe 74, and it stands for, let's see, Family, Education, Rights and Privacy Act. And so the name is very suggestive.
Privacy Act, yep. FERPA.
Yeah, so it's very suggestive that it's family-oriented and privacy-oriented, but in the evolution over the past couple decades, it could be argued that it's flipped to completely the other side of things.
Where we encounter it at Trinity is when parents want to have access to their son or daughter's academic record, right? And, we have to tell them, I'm sorry, your son or daughter's records are private. I'm not even allowed to talk to you without their permission, without their explicit permission, and then I get, who's paying the bills? And it usually leads to interesting conversations. So it's yes, a set of regulations that I guess, again, it might be a nice example of not so much technology, but policies that have both beneficial and harmful effects on privacy. Yeah. So any other examples or questions?
Ralph, it's Kristen. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Well, in our English classes, they do a lot of active reading, and so the kids already have these strategies as they read the chapter, to like actually take out sticky notes and write comments and whatnot. So what I was thinking about doing is before starting the chapters, just having students keep their own lists of pros and cons of privacy topics and whether they're kind of situational or not. But in the end, they can kind of decide what they think was a good thing and not how it should be
Yes. If you go over
used
to
for good and how it was used for harm, that would lead into a little bit.
Yes, and we have a lot of that on the teach side, by the way. I mean, I don't know if you've looked at it. It might be nice to take a quick look at 4.11 on the teach side if you haven't already done so. Because not I, but others have put a lot of thought into various kinds of reading strategies. This particular lesson on the privacy one, there's even some ideas about having a debate in your classroom on privacy. And actually, this particular lesson could extend over 3 days. Day one is debate preparation. Day two, the more debate preparation, and day three is the actual debate itself. So, yeah, I mean, I think teachers have used that to good effect in their classrooms on this particular issue. Okay, so any other thoughts on this before we move on to talk about coin flips and so forth? Okay, so I think what you worked on, according to today's pacing guide, was the coin flip simulation, coin flip projects, and 4.9 was modeling, meaning real world modeling, which we recently modified to include a Hogel activity. In fact, just over the weekend. I don't know whether any of you got to that, but I'd be interested to hear your feedback on it. So let's go one by one. Coin flip simulation. So this was an example of an app that uses App Inventor's random number generator to set a variable to a 1 or a 2 randomly, and then uses that as a model for heads or tails on a coin. Any question? Did you have any problems with that tutorial? Any issues?
Well, I'll start.
Go ahead, sure.
Okay, I'll start. I thought it was very easy and straightforward. No major issues.
That's always good to hear. Anyone have any problems with it at all? It's a fairly straightforward app. All right, what about the project? Coin flip simulation projects, which is 4.8, in which you had some suggested modifications. So some of them are fairly easy. One thing we're trying to do in the revisions we're making now is for every one of these project type lessons, we have tried to include some problem that requires an if-else algorithm, so that students get a lot of practice with if-else algorithms through the course. In this case, the if-else algorithm was modify the app so it can flip a 3-sided coin, and this would extend you to a if-else with three possible outcomes: heads, tails, or edge. Okay, and so that was one problem there. Another one was using the random fraction instead of a random integer block, and I assume that might be somewhat challenging for some students. understanding the random fraction block. The random fraction block generates a number between 0 and 1, not including 1. So it's a decimal value. What you have to do there then is base the outcome, the model, on whether or not the random value is less than or equal to 0.5 or not. Something like that. So did anybody have any questions about that or thoughts about whether students will struggle with that at all?
The only thing I found difficult was finding a good representation of the three-sided die. I know there's a link in the lesson, but as far as like using an actual graphic for the app.
Three-sided coin?
Yeah, was it a three-sided coin? I thought it linked to a three-sided die. It was like a Toblerone package.
Huh.
Maybe I saw something completely different.
I thought it, you mean part 4? Oh yeah, it did, but it is a coin. You're right. It has Toblerone in there. You see those discs in that picture? Yeah. You're right. It's titled "Constructing a Fair Three-Sided Coin." Anyway, and then let's see. So, any other questions about that? Those two problems, 3 and 4. What about 5? Where you're trying to model a Lincoln penny. Supposedly it's biased. And I think that should be, easier to do using the random fraction rather than random integer. Right?
It was just tedious getting the 10 different images in there, and at least how I did it. I'm looking for the super blocks.
10 different images of what?
I had the 10 different images of the coins. You'd shake the table, and then it would flip.
Oh, I see. You actually did it with 10 different coins.
Right.
Aha.
Yeah, no. I think it's easier to just decide if the fraction is less than 0.7, then, give yourself a heads.
Right. So I was thinking when I did that, I just did it for a single coin that would come up heads 70% of the time. But you did it for, how did you do it with 10 coins? Each one had a 50-50 chance of coming up heads? Or 70% chance of coming up heads?
Yeah, each one had a 70% chance of coming up heads.
Uh-huh. That's very nice. But you're right, that's a lot more work than modeling one coin that comes up heads 70% of the time.
Yes.
Okay. Did anyone come up with your own idea for enhancing the app?
Well, all right, this is Larry. I did a simulation where I ran the coin flip like 100 times, to see if it was really going to be 50 heads or whatever. I think that's, and I wanted to suggest, this project seems like a good spot to get a for loop in there, to get some more practice with a for loop. Because I think we only had that once before when we were going through the list. But this is more of a for loop, like, from 1 to 100 or 1 to 50 or something.
Yeah. By the way, so look at one thing that isn't in the pacing guide, and I don't know why, but I would like you to look at lesson, let me see here. Look at lesson 4.6, coin flip experiment. Let's look at that together. I don't know whether we're going to include this in the guide or in the summer or not. But essentially, the reason we don't have a loop programming problem is we have this experiment problem. So one of the learning objectives for modeling is that students should actually come to learn that you use models and experiments, and you form a hypothesis and you conduct an experiment. So this is an attempt to get at that. And what we did, if you scroll through that lesson, you'll see in the middle of the lesson is the code where you have a for loop like Larry is suggesting. Okay?
Yeah.
But basically the way that lesson works is we give the student an app that does what Larry suggested, flips the coin 100 times or so. And then it's going to come out so many times heads, and then you record that. So what we've done is we've suggested that be a POGL activity. And let's just take a moment to look at that activity. I think it's a pretty good lesson. And let's see, where'd it go? I have so many tabs open. So essentially, the POGL team downloads that app and then runs it. And if you look down, constructs a table as the one shown there. So they do a number of trials. It's suggested 20 trials or so, where a trial is running the app once, and that'll flip the coin up to 100 times. And you record your number of heads on each trial of 100 flips, and you'll see that you'll get a certain percentage. What I think should be instructive, I don't know, is that it's not always going to come out 50-50. Some students may expect that, I don't know. But hopefully if you do, if students do fill out that table, and we're trying to put together a spreadsheet that can be used to actually record their results, that'll do the calculations for them. If you did this 10 or 20 times, then the numbers in the right column should converge towards 50% as you get more and more cumulative trials. Okay? And so the way this lesson is presented is as one way to test whether App Inventor's random number generator is a good one or not. Remember we talked about the PRNG last week? So this is a case where they actually get to do some experimentation to see how good it is. In this case, with just this one coin flipping model. And then if you go down to the reflections for this unit, one of the things we hope to engage the students in is the last question there. You know, we're using a coin flip app. And so this experiment, if it comes out well, shows that App Inventor's random integer block works well when you're generating a number between 1 and 2 randomly. But is that enough to really confirm that it's a good pseudo-random number generator? Probably not, right? And what other kinds of experiments might we do in the course or think about that would help, give us more confidence in its fairness? So that's kind of the point of that exercise. And part of it is discussing that algorithm with them that's in the middle of the page, so they at least see it here, and then they're going to be using it in the logo lesson, which is coming up. So thoughts on that?
This is Andrew here. One of the things I did was I accessed the number of trials that one could have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that students might find it a lot of fun to go up to 1,000 or even run it up to, say, to 10,000 and take a look at those numbers.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. In fact, you could do that by breaking into teams and having each team do 20 or 2,000 and then putting them all together, right?
Certainly.
And we've done that. That's how we've done it in class at Trinity. We have students do the experiments individually, then we pull all their data together and look at it, look at the numbers we get that way. So it is, I do think that lesson leads to some good discussions of randomness and, helps, I guess, clear up some misconceptions about it that students may have. Any other thoughts about it?
Yeah, I guess, sorry, Ralph, it's Larry again. One of the things I guess I struggle with is when we hand them the answers, are they gonna know how to use it when they're doing their Create 2?
Where are you handing them the answers, though?
Well, like in that lesson you just showed me, you handed them the for loop.
Right, well, we're not asking them to program it, though. We're not going to give them that loop to program.
But in the Create 2, right? If they don't show a for loop, at least currently by the by the rubric, they can't get a full score. So unless they have a familiarity with actually using and struggling through their own for loops, I don't think they'll show up much.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's coming.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Right. I mean, this problem is actually, I would say, more complex than they may have to do for the exam. Right. So
okay. It just seemed like a good spot to get practice in that form loop, which But if it's coming, it's coming. I know it's coming.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, let's talk about this a little bit, because one of the suggestions was, remember when you guys were doing the logo problems, right? A lot of you were saying, can we use a loop? Can we use a loop? We were saying, no, that's coming in logo part 2. So based on the feedback we're getting, we're thinking that what we may want to do is put the loops into logo part 1. So after you've gone through those exercises and requested being able to use loops, we go ahead and use loops in logo part 1 to draw those figures that you had to draw in logo part 1, and then again in logo part 2, but they're introduced for the first time in logo part 1, which is in week 4, unit 4. Do you have any thoughts on that? Personally, I think it's a good improvement. Logo, in the sequence of things, comes just before this. So they will have, we do that, they will have used loops in logo part 1.
Using a loop to draw a rectangle or a square can work, but I don't know if it really highlights the power of loops for students who are seeing loops for the first time. I might try something like a loop that draws a spiral that increments the rectangular radius by a certain number of pixels each iteration. Maybe a logo 3.
No, that's in logo 2.
I'm not so sure that in the first, if we had been students, I'm not sure we would have been asking for a loop.
Well, you might have been asking, isn't there a better way to do this than having to have 20 move statements in a row? But I think actually, so remember, they used loops in the maze problems, right? At the very beginning of the course. So my sense is having them do very simple loops in logo part 1 gets them started in a simple way. the thing with drawing spirals is not only are you going to loop, but you're going to change some parameter involved in the loop, right? And I think that's a good thing to do, but that actually happens in Logo Part 2, which is next week, next unit. So yeah, so that happens there, and then there'll be other projects where they'll use loops later in the course as well. There's where we use a list of things. They have to loop through a list. So they're going to get loops. Don't worry. You know, I just think, you know, going back to the theme of the course, placing the emphasis on learning programming for the sake of learning programming is what we're trying to avoid. We want them to learn programming for the sake of creating something that they care about and want to do. And as I've said many times, with App Inventor, there aren't many cases where something they want to do requires them to use a loop. So we're looking for good examples of that, but you know, it's a challenge. So if we took a show of hands on putting loops in Logo Part 1 in that simple way, would most of you be in favor of that? I see some thumbs going up. Yeah, good. Okay, so we will work on that. We won't be able to get it done in time for it to, because we've got to go over that in Logo Part 2, but you'll see the parts we're going to move out when we do go over Logo Part 2. So, okay, so if you look at what's involved in this coin flip modeling set of lessons, you have your tutorial where you learn to build a simple model of a coin flip app. You have your projects. You have your experiments, where this experiment that I've just described to you, where you get to use the model to make a hypothesis and think about the hypothesis, which is, again, something the College Board has in the framework. Then you have those projects that you worked on today. Then the next lesson in that sequence is Real World Models 4.9. And that also is one we've changed up a bit. It was primarily just watching some videos of real world models, climate models, and so on. And what we've done there is we've added a POGL activity that that asks you to ask students to experiment with a predator-prey model. I bet some of you have already some experience with that kind of model, predator-prey, rabbits and wolves in this case. But we think it's a little bit more interactive than just watching and talking about one of those real-world modeling videos. Thoughts? Did you folks get to do this, or at least read through it?
Yeah, this one is really good. In fact, so I teach biology, so I'm gonna try to incorporate this into when I'm teaching that course as well.
Cool, that'd be cool.
It looks suspiciously like the marine biology case study.
What is that?
That's the old case study for the AP Computer Science A.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, is that a plus or a minus?
I thought it was fun to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's an improvement over what we had there before.
Yeah.
It's not as good as a field trip to the casino. I don't know whether we could get away with that. One of my colleagues does do that, though, in his statistics course. But they're, That's college.
Yeah, they're older.
Yeah. Okay, so I think other thoughts on that set of lessons?
Hey, Ralph.
Yeah.
The temperature model was really a pain. I went back and forth with emails with Pauline, but to try to identify exactly what number was the temperature at a certain date, even with pausing, was really quite a challenge. If that would have been matched up with actual data, we're looking at numbers, not just the map that we had to pause, I think it would have been a little bit easier to work on for students.
Which one is that, by the way?
The third one down, it's the third video we're supposed to watch. We're supposed to come up with data for 2020, 2030, 2040 per hour latitude.
Can you reload your browser to see the new lesson? Yeah, I'm sorry that we're working at such, so it's not just me either. It's other people have to work and sign off on these things before we get to make it live. But I'm guessing you're not seeing that in there anymore.
It's completely redone now. I mean, I went round and round with Pauline about this, and I don't know if she removed it or somebody else did, but
Pauline didn't remove it, but the reason we changed this is partly because of what the frustration you had, that it was not very easy. That was a very complex simulation model there, and you're right, it wasn't that easy to get at the numbers. So we've changed it. We've dropped that one out completely, and we've replaced it. You see the POGL activity just before the little videos?
Yeah, I see it now. Yeah, and it looks a lot cleaner too.
Yeah, I mean, so this is, as you read it, if you've got better ideas in terms of what would be a simple hypothesis that they could work on. So in this case, the hypothesis is, what would happen if there were lots more bunnies than there were wolves? Would the bunnies take over and live forever? So basically, you can control how many bunnies to put in the model initially, and wolves, and run the model and see what happens, and then answer the question. So we're asking them to make a prediction about what would happen and use the model to either confirm or refute their prediction. So it's much easier to control that kind of simple simulation than something that's complicated with weather. And I think it gets the point across better. They have to use it for a simple hypothesis that they can wrap their heads around.
Ralph, can I just confirm there was a way in that model that you could change the number of either bunnies or wolves?
Yeah, it's on the bottom. It's on the bottom. That parameter.
Really?
Yeah.
Bottom. Okay, I couldn't find that. Thank you.
And when I was doing it, everybody died in the 20 bunnies and 5 wolves. Nobody survived. I don't know how that's a balance, but just the grass survived. So.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah.
I tried lots of variables, and in every situation, only the grass survived. It didn't matter what I changed.
I agree. I kept trying to get some symbiotic sine waves but they all just died.
Really?
I guess in the future, no animals will be left. Just the forest.
Well, if only the grass survives, maybe this app was created in Colorado or Washington or something.
Do you think we should try to find a different one? There are others out there.
The question, if you put more bunnies in, more wolves and less bunnies. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, obvious answer that the wolves are just going to die off, and everyone's going to die off. But yeah, I mean, it was fun to play around with the parameters, I guess, and Well,
what does it mean though if only the grass survives?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should find one that doesn't have grass. The evil grass.
Well, I think we could drive our class crazy by asking them to find some parameters that would balance the two.
Uh-huh.
Over a good period of time, yeah.
So I guess it's the fact that they run. It's the fact that they run out of. Well, if they have lots of grass, isn't that what the bunnies eat?
The wolves eat the bunnies too fast.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that sounds like you'll get lots of conversation going. But if you find an alternative simulation model like that we can use with similar questions, let us know. Those are the ones I came across in my limited.
Outdoor would chastise you for not including the effects of climate change.
So, okay, let's see. What else is on our pacing guide for today? Growth mindset. This is on the teach side. This is tricky because almost everyone believes we have a growth mindset, but actually one's behavior doesn't always sort of align with it. It's, and I'm speaking for myself when I sometimes find myself saying things and then thinking back on them and saying, well, maybe that wasn't such a growth mindset way to say that. So I think if you open up the page on that, on the teach side, there's a short video to watch, and there's a nice table there for ways to talk about student work and student effort and activity to sort of promote the growth mindset. So instead of saying good job, you could say, I can really see your effort in these mini projects. And the reason, the good thing about that is praising effort and process encourages students to keep trying. Instead of saying you're a good programmer, how about those early versions paid off? You now have well-defined procedures that you can reuse. So again, it's just sort of different ways of phrasing things to promote persistence, promote the belief that it's not a matter of being smart or not smart. It's a matter of working hard and persisting on things and being supported well. So any thoughts on this? This is very important for the main goal of the course, which is trying to broaden participation among many students. I'm sure you've experienced this, who think they're not programmers, or they're not computer scientists, or they're not good at math. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think there's some practical suggestions for how to incorporate this sort of climate or culture in your classrooms. Thoughts?
We really pushed the growth mindset over at MOT Charter. It's not just, though, towards the students. It's also to the parents. We find a lot of the parents come in and their expectation is that in the past in other schools, their child has always gotten an A and done very little homework. Come to our school, it's much more rigorous than what most students are used to, and the parents become quite upset that they're not getting these easy A's anymore. And so we constantly bring back the idea, because you weren't challenged. Now you are being challenged, and no, she doesn't have an A or he does not have an A yet.
Yeah.
But the growth in knowledge is much more than what you've seen in, say, the previous year. And it takes about 6 to 8 months, at least 2 report cycles, for the parents to kind of see, like, you're right, I am seeing changes. But until you kind of point that mindset out, not just to the kids, but to the parents as well, in terms of having to look at your expectations based on past experience in an environment where you're maybe seeing rigor for the first time, or at least consistently across all subject matter.
Yeah.
And so retraining the parents for that mindset is helpful too.
Yep. And then I think it would be important to do a similar kind of thing here, you know. Parents may, in fact, one of the theories I heard about why boys mainly got into computing in the 80s, in the late 70s and 80s, is because the whole industry was promoting playing games on your Commodore 64 to boys and not girls. And so it's led to lots of this thinking that, well, this isn't for me. I'm not good at this. This is good for boys. So yeah.
Why do you think that is now?
Why do I think what is?
That the field tends to attract mostly men.
I think it's still suffering from this culture that existed for a long time.
You know, one of the videos in there that I watched was on, well, I watched most of it, but Rapunzel's hair. And how it was, how it was simulated. And it was very technical. But I also thought, this video will reach out to girls better. And that, I guess I felt that was the first one I saw that was really targeted to, turning or exciting girls' interest.
And yeah, that's one of my former students, Kelly Ward. She was a CS math and physics major.
Wow.
And for her senior project, she did a physics accurate model of a billiards game with all the forces, friction and momentum and so on, all being accurately modeled. I think this is way bigger than computer science. I think it's American in a sense. I saw this really interesting story in the New York Times a year or so ago about a New York Times reporter went to observe grammar school in Japan. And the story that he or she told was the class was working on some particular graphing problem in math class. And they had to all work individually to draw a certain graph. And the teacher would go around and look over their shoulders and see how they're coming. So she picked on one boy and asked him to go up to the board and put his solution on the board. And then she asked the class, "Is that right, class?" And the class said no. And so the boy had to go back to his table and work some more on it. And then this happened 2 or 3 times where the teacher asked him to go up again. And no, but it's better. And eventually he went up and he got it correct and got a big applause and walked away with a big smile on his face that he had succeeded. So the point drawn by the writer of this article was that the difference between the culture there, where it's not you're smart and you just get it without doing any homework, it's you've got to work at these things. Everybody has to work at them and persist at working on them. And that's what the goal is, to work hard and get it in the end, not to get it without doing any work because you're smart. So I really think this is something that pervades U.S. education. And I know I'm guilty of it with my own kids. So, yeah.
Ralph, my colleagues and I debate about this because, some people are on one side, some people are on the other. But, you look at a top student in in high school, you say, well, they have a knack for intelligence, right? But then you say, well, at some point in their lives, they worked really, really hard, or from the beginning, they worked really, really hard to get where they are, to that top high school student, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's the reason why anyone can really change if they start working hard, is that, you know, but the top students now, they obviously worked hard at some point. They had to get to where they are, you know?
Yep.
So that's like what I use for when we're debating back and forth.
You know, another thing that I come across all the time, actually, we had a dean here who would say this all the time. The dean of the college, right, would say, I don't do math. And she was a literature scholar. And I never had the nerve to say this to her, but I felt like it, saying, we don't read, we don't do reading or writing. I mean, that would be so outrageous if people went around saying that regarding reading and writing, but we don't. But it seems to be acceptable to say that, even among educated people, when it comes to math and computation. So, you know, it's a tough, I don't know what you call it, misconception or culture to be pushing against, but it's, you know, it's deeply rooted that it's okay to throw up your hands and say, I can't do math at some point in your educational career. But
Tony, I've run into where it's parents who are kind of driving that. I've had several parents of students who are struggling who are giving their children an excuse by saying, I had trouble with math in high school too, and I never got it. So, and then they don't push their child to try harder so they do get it. So that's the one I keep running into that I have no idea how to get past.
Yep. Well, I mean, I think, like, let's see, that was Pat Mooney said, you have to educate the parents about this too.
Somebody has to break the cycle.
You're right. You know, one thing working in our advantage, though, I've noticed this, not as much as I'd like, but I've seen evidence of this. If students want to build an app that does something they're interested in, they'll work on the math part of it. Right? So, for example, one app I had in my class last time I taught it was an app that was meant to tell you whether you were intoxicated or not. And it had to, you had to walk and hold the, the accelerometer, hold the device steady. And if you tilted it too much in one direction or the other, you know, you go outside the lines and that would indicate you weren't very steady. It's sort of like a, what do you call those tests? Where you have to walk the line and
Field sobriety.
Yeah, there you go. And they worked on the math until they got that app to work out. So you do see examples like that. So maybe we can use some of those examples to, you know, encourage them to keep at it and solve those kinds of problems.
I heard a great line today at the conference I'm at. I'm not good at math, ... yet.
Yep, that's nice. That's the attitude we want them to have. And, you know, people who teach you computer science got better at programming themselves as they persisted at it.
Hey, Ralph, before we get off, I just have a question on the pacing guide.
Okay.
There's something on Friday that says 6.9 data and information.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of these haven't really matched up perfectly. So I'm just, which data, is it really 6.9 or is it one of the other 4 data ones that you want us to work on for Friday?
Let me take a look at that real quick.
Because a lot of the numbers seem to have changed.
6.9. It points to 6.8, doesn't it? Yeah. It points to 6.8. So I think that's the one, and I may be just misnumbered.
Okay, so 6.8 big data?
Yeah.
Okay. And when are we going to talk about the Explore project?
Is it on the pacing guide?
for Thursday.
Yeah.
That's what we're supposed to be doing that.
How about tomorrow?
Okay.
Because Pauline is actually just today has been revising those. You know, one of the things we noticed about the create task is this disconnect between the way we were to what we were asking students to produce for our course, right? Versus what the College Board is asking them to produce for their exam. And I think we want to try to, for the Explore task, an effort's already been made to bring those into sync, okay? So, but Pauline and Jen are still working on that. So we'll talk about it tomorrow a little bit, yeah? So for tomorrow you have Pong and some debugging to work on. Again, 2 more programming lessons primarily. And we'll discuss those, and we can also talk about the Explore task for that a little bit on the Hangout. Sound like a plan?
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're at the end of the hour. I'm happy to hang out if folks have questions you want to hang out and ask, but otherwise, keep up the good work, and we'll see you all again tomorrow.
Thanks so much, Ralph.
Thanks,
All right, thanks. Have a good weekend. Good evening.
Okay.
Again, I'm already on Friday.
Bye-bye. All right.